Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I suspect for most people it is good morning because most of you are going to be watching from America. A special drone stuff this week, special on a Friday. It's Friday night at 5:30 here, so I can drink beer. But for everybody else, it's a work day. And by everybody else, I mean all the fellows in America. We are honored to be joined not only by Dr. Michael Singer, a Harvard professor who has, well, kind of kicked the doors open really in some regards in a legal sense, but we'll get to more of that in a minute. But for the first time, we have John Goyer joining us with Loretta, Jonathan Rupert, and of course Patrick Egan, who's sat there. So first off, good day everybody, whatever time of day it is with you across America.
Morning.
Good morning.
Well, there we are. So let's start off. Why I'm a city? Why can't I have? And here's Steve. Good day, Steve. Steve Cohen's just joining us from the DUG, the Drone User Group Network. Why can't? I'm a small town. I'm really hacked off with these drone operators. Why on earth can't I create some regulations to stop trouble and stop all the nuisance? Who wants to start with that? I think it's a good idea. No, can't tempt anyone in. Jonathan, you go first. Well, you flinched.
Oh, yeah, I flinched. And so, I mean, I understand the reasoning of the states, towns, and counties that are trying to kind of wrangle in this drone problem, right? They see some potential issues, or they think there are some potential issues, and so they want to get a hold of it, and so they create these laws. And while they're maybe well intending to, you know, create these laws to protect their citizenry, the big problem is Article 6 of the United States Constitution. There's a specific clause in that. It's called the Supremacy Clause, meaning that when there's a federal law and there is a state or state subdivisions version, and they interact in some way, then what ends up happening is that the federal law wins. And that's what happened here, is that there was Congress passed some laws, the FAA implemented some regulations, and these were being substantially frustrated by the city of Newton's drone ordinance.
So what does that mean? What, Dr. Singer, perhaps you might run us through, what have you just had to do and why did you do it?
Sure, Gary. So maybe I'll return to first principles. In the case of the city of Newton, the drone ordinance was enacted based purely on theoretical concerns. There had actually been no police reports of any drone-related episodes in the city except for one, and that drone was actually operated by the city itself. So it was the ordinance was founded on concerns among a small number of council members about essentially horror stories about privacy. Someone using a drone to peer into someone's bedroom window, for example. Of course, there were kind of sensationalistic concerns about munitions mounted on drones and so forth. So this kind of turned into a runaway legislative effort where technical experts in the FAA were not consulted. And there were some sensible parts of this ordinance. Some prohibitions on activities that are otherwise prohibited by other kinds of laws, reckless conduct, harming people with drones, using them to peer into areas that are considered private, conducting otherwise prohibited forms of surveillance. And yet there were a few provisions that we'll discuss in more detail that really did inhibit lawful, responsible operations of unmanned aircraft. So I did not challenge the prohibitions on obvious antisocial behavior, but I was interested in challenging these provisions that prohibited drone navigation in what I believe is national airspace, and provisions that created a parallel and onerous additional system of local registration. Finally, there was one provision that was essentially a botched visual line of sight provision, and I asked the court to declare that unlawful as well.
And they found for you. Was it a runaway success? How did it end up?
Well, I think the headline is that I asked the court to strike down 4 separate provisions in the ordinance, and the court agreed on all 4 counts. As for whether it's a runaway success, I think the devil will be in the details, and I'm interested to hear what other members of this panel think.
Okay, well, let's throw it open to lawyers to respond to that then. Dear lawyers, go ahead over.
Well, I'm certainly thrilled, and I did work with Dr. Singer on this case. I was honored to have been asked to write an affidavit in support of the case, and I think that it's the first case that stands for what many of us have been saying, which is that a lot of these local laws are preempted. But notwithstanding what aviation lawyers have been saying for a long time, throughout the country, local municipalities and states are passing preempted laws, and no one has stood up to challenge them, not any organization. And it really took Dr. Singer, again, like with John Taylor, an individual, to say, you know, this has to stop and stand up and litigate. And I hope that other communities that are looking to pass drone ordinances are going to stop and rethink what they're doing.
And is that what this point is? Is this, sorry, Patrick, I'll let you after this. Is that what this point is? Is this the point in law that they must now consider when they try and do the same thing? Does it have the possibility to stop anything? This, because it's spreading like wildfire over there, I believe.
Well, legally, it's not precedent. On the other hand, it's so well reasoned, and it relies on cases that are applicable throughout the country. So other municipalities would certainly do well to follow the decision, but hopefully it will perhaps embolden people to challenge some of these laws.
And it is, Victor in the comments has said it's terrible that the industry as a whole has not stepped up to the plate. And yeah, I guess it is. There's been a few corners of people ranting. We rant about it almost every week, don't we? But who would players to be putting the case, do we think?
Well, you know, I think I'm going to kind of agree with Loretta here that you would think that some of the, let's say, advocacy groups, or maybe some of the lobby groups, or the heavy duty law firms, the high power ones, would be the ones stepping in. They supposedly say that they're advocating for the end user, and I'm really surprised. You know, maybe first with the Taylor case was a little bit of an anomaly. Some guy goes out on his own and he tries to make a point here, but now we have like 2 points on the board. And it is curious to me. I'm wondering, why are the advocacy groups not the experts, the advocates, whatever? Why aren't they out there spending the money that they have to spearhead this effort?
Well, I should say that the Consumer Technology Association and AUVSI, to their credit, did prepare and file an amicus brief. So I'd say that. And I should take an opportunity also to thank many of you on this conference today who participated, as Loretta mentioned. Thank you also to John, who was an expert witness, and to Jonathan, who provided a lot of advice through the process.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Patrick.
All right. Well,
I was just going.
And I'm glad that you, Dr. Singer, you took the time to thank those people that did that. Now, I mean, going right back to that, we're talking about groups that have, budgets of, plus or minus $10 million. You would think they could step forward and say, hey, you know what? Instead of somebody volunteering their time or helping out, which is great. And I mean, my hat's off to you guys for that. And I appreciate that. But that to me is what a 501c6 would do. We're here for the whole benefit of the whole community. And we're going to step forward and do something that's going to help this community flourish. And thus far, I'm just not seeing that. Besides these efforts,
I wanted to ask Dr. Singer, how, if it's not too rude, this is a rude question. How did you manage to fund this? This can't have been cheap.
Well, you know, when you file a lawsuit pro se, it turns out it's not that expensive. It was $400 to file, I think, about $100 to have the city served, and a modest amount in other expenses. So it was worth it to me to invest the personal funds.
And why did you feel the need to? What was the? Have you been an error modeler for years? Did you think it was treading on your toes? Did you just get into the draw? Why did you feel such a strong need to go down this path?
I've had a long-standing interest in aviation. I had not been involved in unmanned aircraft for long, and I think in one way that's what made me most upset when I opened up the newspaper and read that this ordinance had passed. I'm a technology entrepreneur, and I focus on healthcare. And after selling my previous company, I had been evaluating a number of opportunities to develop a new healthcare company, and this has been one area I've been looking closely at. So I had just bought a couple of new drones and started to run some testing, and I was pretty upset when I found out about the news. And the more that I read about preemption, the more I realized that this ordinance was open to challenge.
And will this? Everybody's asking, will this, and is thinking that this is going to apply across the states now. Can we unpack that a little bit more? How it may or may not help help other cases, or is there nothing more to unpack on that? Maybe there's nothing more to unpack. Okay, so if you're following along at home, I put a link in the bottom to Jonathan's article. Let's jump to Jonathan's article and go through the various points, if that's okay with you there, Jonathan.
Sure.
Well, you know, I'm a layman. I don't really understand all of this. So the first point of the 4 points that that's been struck down was the registration part of it. Was that just knocked out of the way quickly? How did they try and defend that or come back against that?
Well, what was interesting there was that the city of Newton was pointing out that the ruling in the Taylor case somehow created this void that allowed for registration. However, the court said no, and so the FAA is actually intended to be the exclusive register of unmanned aircraft. And so if city of Newton were to register, require registration, then no longer is the FAA being the intended, exclusive register stands. So then therefore this is a conflict preempted situation, and then therefore city of Newton loses.
It's interesting that this didn't come through in the written decision, but during oral arguments, the city argued to the judge that they had to have a local registration system because the FAA was unreliable and could not be relied upon to share registration information in a reasonable period of time.
Well, have we got any ex-employees of the FAA here that might want to comment on that?
I think that the one thing that the FAA is pretty cooperative with is local law enforcement, and if the database is up to date, which can be an issue, it's not that difficult. Plus, a lot of this information is just available online anyway.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to. Sorry, you're about in there, John, Patrick.
Oh no, I just this is interesting. But when later on in the program, if we get the time to speculate on some of maybe the ICAO idea that or the UN that we would have like an international registration database, I'd like to touch on that. Get
sure,
let's say some legal opinions on that one.
Well, we've actually got a man there. He might even join us from Canada. We've got a man sat there right now listening and eating cakes. No, he's not. He's on a diet, actually. Anyway, and he's going to the gym. He's doing very well, David. Very, very well. So point number two was the altitude, operational restrictions and altitude. I see on that. What was that all about?
Yeah, there was actually two provisions there that, working in effect, basically created an almost complete ban. So, and each of those could probably be struck down individually on their own. You know, not just kind of like if they were, you know, together in the ordinance. If Newt went back and just took out one, they could probably each get struck down. So, for instance, one of the subsection C1A, prohibits pilotless aircraft flight below at an altitude of 400 feet. And so unless they have the express permission of the property owner, so that becomes problematic because the FAA put these unmanned aircraft in the 0 to 400 range unless you obtain some type of waiver to fly above 400 feet. And so that right there is going to be causing conflict preemption because the FAA wanted to open up the airspace and put in unmanned aircraft there. And then there was another provision that had no altitude limit, and it was for flights over the public property that went straight up into navigable airspace per like manned aircraft regulations. When I'm using that is manned aircraft regulations, the part 91's section 91 119, where, you know, the 500 feet away from whatever you don't own, congested areas, 1,000 feet over the tallest object. So it was interesting. I noticed that the court mentioned navigable airspace there and cited 91 119. But what didn't really dive in any further into Part 107 and whether or not that somehow created navigable airspace going all the way to the ground. But regardless of that, the court struck it down on kind of 2 points: conflict, as well as it goes up into navigable airspace.
And let's see, basically, in your article, which is linked below, Jonathan's article unpacks all of this. It says, how does the singer, my bad.
Stinger, what is a missile?
Stinger. Yeah, Stinger. Anyway, how does it affect me?
Stinger man.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, my bad. But how does it affect me? Have you been, there's two things I'm going to ask now. Has your phone been off the hook today, Jonathan? And have there been, I haven't seen any official responses from the AMA, AUVSI, or anybody else, or have I just missed them today?
I don't, maybe everybody's just kind of digesting, thinking about what they want to do in this situation, because, I mean, this is different than the Taylor case, which was primarily with registration, and a lot of the groups were kind of in favor of registration, while I think probably more now, like with AMA, AUVSI, CTA, they're probably going to end up coming out in favor of this decision, is what I think what'll happen, because this affects, you know, the commercial as well as the recreational operators. It's good for all, while the registration one with Taylor was only for the recreational guys.
Yeah, and there was a lot of hate for the after the Taylor one. There was a lot of, oh, this is terrible, what an evil man, and let's hope that's undone. He's not an evil man, but, you know, there was an awful lot of bad vibes, I thought, against that. And at the end of the day, the Taylor case, like this one, is just, it's just right. It's just the right things happening. The FAA in that case couldn't bulldoze everyone, and in this case, cities and or whatever your statutory groups are, they can't roller coaster through things. Sorry, Patrick, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to make the same point. You know, I was a little disappointed after the Taylor case. The supposed advocates and you know, let's say the pro groups kind of came out, oh God, this is bad. Oh, you know, and there might be a profit motive to that. I mean, I think now we're in a situation where, if you look at the numbers, before the Taylor case, the administrator came out, oh, we have 800,000 drones registered, more than manned aircraft, you know, blowing the kazoo. Now at the latest drone show, it comes out, oh, we got 77,000, commercial registered drones. The numbers kind of shrank. I mean, you had Colin on here the other day talking about the, let's say the value of the of this technology, or alluding to that. And I'm wondering if things are kind of changing a little bit. I wonder even if UTM is necessary with such low numbers. You know?
Just you to bring that in, but we'll come back to that a bit later, and I'll tell you why we'll come back to that, because I know that John and Loretta are going to be teaching again at the top of the hour. So I'm wondering if we should be getting a voice from you guys before you have to go. Am I putting you on the spot there?
No, I did want to say that it's not just well, actually, even in recent times, AOPA has been a big proponent of protecting the rights of general aviation. We don't have something similar to that in the world. So we had talked about what Patrick said and others said about no one coming forward and suing across the country. But it's also the FAA. I was involved in any number of cases where preemption was an issue, and the FAA would come in through the Justice Department and sue local governments, airports, etc., that were regulating aviation in a way that was inimical to a seamless transportation system. And we're not seeing that. We have laws all over the place that impede drone operations, and the FAA hasn't stepped in. They wrote a fact sheet. Well, you know, people have taken that fact sheet and basically interpreted it, a lot of them the way Newton did. They thought it gave them the right to legislate. So it's not just the lobbying groups that have stepped back and not fulfilled, I think, the role that they should, but also the federal.
Sorry, Loretta. So do you think that's the root of the problem then, a lack of clear direction from the FAA?
I just think that no one has stepped forward. I think they're waiting for Congress. It's kind of this dithering. No one's doing anything, and they've left it to individuals like Dr. Singer who step forward and start the ball rolling. Maybe this will shame them into doing something. That's all I think.
And would this form a template then for people wishing to do as Dr. Singer's done in their own municipality? Is this a route and a way? Is there a for dummies guide now almost?
Well, certainly take his brief and change it to fit whatever the local ordinance is.
But is that how? I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm the least qualified person on many levels. But so is that what a lawyer would do now? Would they look at the paperwork and say, okay, this is how they did it, then this is how we shall do it? As you say, modifying it accordingly.
Well, I mean, if they wanted to save their clients money, that would be an approach.
Turn it over, Julie.
You guys, you never flipping answer. It's different lawyers. No, okay. So that's a good approach, and then that's all available in the public domain. Then is that all of this stuff?
Yeah, there's no copyright.
Okay, Jonathan, I can't tempt you in this, and Dr. Singer, your telephone line must be a little bit hot today as well.
Oh, a little bit, just a little. Still sinking in, I think.
Are you receiving any heat yet, or is it all positive stuff?
It's interesting. When I filed and the news broke, most of the social media commentary was very critical. And
surprised that, huh?
Yeah, but it now the same channels. I'm thinking, for instance, of a local platform where people post comments about city matters. It's much more positive, and I suppose that's what happens when a judge agrees with your position. Maybe people take a fresh look at it and change their mindset.
And I suppose there's going to be other community groups that have got other gripes with the city that will be quite pleased that the city took a punch on the nose from you, really.
Well, there is the city passed a controversial ordinance controlling leaf blowers several months ago. That generated much more controversy than the drone ordinance. And you do see some correlation here. I'm not expressing any position on the leaf blower rule.
No, obviously one wouldn't want to get embroiled in the leaf blower controversy. And funny enough that Patrick's here, I saw somebody made what was that plane you put the camera on? A stick. They made a giant stick and they put a leaf blower on it as the motor. But anyway, so I can even bring that in.
get it.
Steve Cohen, sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
I had a social media disclaimer, Dr. Singer, and I'll just say everyone that just, besides the followers of the SUAS News Twitter, are nuts. So just whatever they say with a grain of salt.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Steve, you were mentioning, I see in the comments, that the community is us. We need to pressure the advocacy groups that are funded to work with the actual user groups. So there's a disconnect there, do you think, Steve?
Well, yeah, I think that our group, the Drone User Group Network, is really very much grassroots. You know, our funding is a fraction of somewhat, you know, of a group like AUVSI or Consumer Electronics Association, or I'm probably botching that name, but or CTA. But you know, we're not a trade group. We're primarily geared to preserving 336 and recreational use, and that's not sexy and it's not profitable for most industry. You know, aside from, you know, 3-letter drone manufacturer from China, you know, that has 80% of the market share. And, you know, while we do get, you know, I'll say emotional and situational support, you know, our group is volunteer based. And, you know, anybody who spent any time on social media knows that it's a viper's nest. You know, as proven earlier in the week, you won't like me when I'm angry. But it doesn't, you know, there's a disconnect in the terms of the uneducated populace versus, and the uneducated legislators and the manufacturers groups and commercial interests that don't really care much for the small change recreational operator. So when and I know that you know, Dr. Singer's victory affects both commercial and recreational use, which is fantastic. And we do bridge that gap. We're not unlike you know, the other CBO in model aircraft. You know, they're kind of limited to you know, to that dividing line, whereas we are not. And so it's you know, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing that we've been working with for years to try and motivate you know, a population and educate lawmakers and all that sort of stuff. And we're, you know, I'm kind of responding to Patrick's critique of the advocacy groups, and you know, dancing as fast as we can, but you know, like we helped fund the Taylor case and got a lot of heat for it, and that was purely, you know, that was procedural argument. You know, that was, you can't make regulations. You made regulations. You know, so the general public doesn't care to get so granular, and so, you know, we tried to make our mission more about education and advocacy. It's not resulting in money in our coffer, at least not yet. You know,
not very sexy, is it, at the end of the day? And
no, I guess not. But we're certainly open to, and maybe Patrick would be open to helping, and others would be open to helping in how do we bridge the gap between the funded advocacy and the actual boots on the ground user.
Funny you say that, because you know, I've been trying that since about 2004 with the RCAPA. You know, a lot of the let's say trials and tribulations that you're lamenting, I've already been through. I call it the NAS integration wheel of suffering. A lot of which you're
in the trough of disillusionment right now, I think. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
We've crashed in there and we're rolling around in the avalanche. Okay. But the thing with that is you know, many of these things that you're talking about have been viewed before, and really there's been this situation where we've had lots of you know, opportunities that were missed. Now I think I don't want to take over your show, but I think are we getting to a time where someone has to go?
Yeah, we are. We are getting towards the time where the teachers are go and teach.
Yes, so we're going to say goodbye.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. We're honored to have you, John. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and thank you, Loretta, as ever. Don't forget, team, normally, we're not going to end now, but normally we do this at 2100 GMT every Tuesday, so join us again there if you're a first-time viewer. And thanks, guys. Thanks very much. Victor Villegas has got a song for us, which I will add in at the end of the show, Victor. And I also want to mention we've had a comment. We've got to scroll back up in the comments. Where did it go? A US Air Star says NC. You know, guys know where that is. I don't know where that is.
North Carolina.
Requires North Carolina. Okay. Requires a well, we didn't get to name all of it, did we? A 107 pilot to have an NCDOT drone permit to operate. How does this tie into this case? So that again was NC requires a 107 pilot have a NCDOT drone permit to operate. How does this tie into the case? So I guess he's asking, are they allowed to do it? Can they do that?
That's actually really interesting because like I'm literally typing up an email, like literally answering the North Carolina thing, like literally right now. It's kind of interesting. So how does this kind of play out? Well, it specifically was actually regarding registration, this kind of operational restriction, and then beyond line of sight of the operator that kind of changed things up, or if you will, locked them in to what an FAA could do things differently. Well, they didn't bring up anything in regards to like a pilot certification, even though that there was a case that was cited there by the Rhode Island, I believe, where Rhode Island tried to come up with some, was it a mandatory sobriety test, I believe it was. And so then the courts actually struck that down, is that the FAA is the exclusive really guide determining safety in this area. But that was really the first circuit, and North Carolina is not in the First Circuit. So other courts, might look to that as being, and kind of follow that same reasoning, but it can be different. And so that would be one thing. There's a different court there. And secondly, this didn't really apply to licensing whatsoever. I guess that what would be interesting here is how, like, I guess the closest akin at a state level would be Minnesota, which I believe has its own kind of version of a registration that needs to be done for commercial operators. So I'm wondering how they are going to handle this. But they're also outside of the outside of the jurisdiction, and they're even outside of the district, the Massachusetts District Court. They're outside of that, right? Because they're not Massachusetts, and they're also outside of the First Circuit in the event that this was to be appealed and affirmed. So other states are going to probably take note of this, because North Carolina isn't the only one that has tried to get aggressive in regulating unmanned aircraft.
So you say they're going to take note. What does that really mean? Do they have to take note, or do they? Can they just ignore this? Just to unpack that for the layman a little bit, please.
There is someone similarly situated, I guess, that you could say. They just lost based upon creating a registration scheme, and a federal judge struck that down. So in the event someone were in like Minnesota to file a lawsuit, there is at least a case they can point to in another federal district court that struck this down. So while it's not going to guarantee you're going to win, another judge will be like, okay, well, someone else went this way. And another thing that this case did is it teed up, if you will, some of these legal issues for other judges on how to answer. So they didn't answer on the grounds of express preemption or field preemption, but on conflict preemption, which is kind of, you can narrowly tailor that, kind of figure out some way that whatever ordinance or state law violates at least, or conflicts with the federal law in some way. And so it kind of gave future judges that judges in the future looking at these type of issues ways to get rid of this without looking like they're some rogue guy, right? They're just going to go, oh, the Judge Young did this. And so we're just going to kind of follow the same similar pattern, and this could potentially spread more so. And so Minnesota, North Carolina, other states that have much more aggressive drone laws can be looking like, hey, we might want to retool this, or do you want to just like hold out and see what happens if we get, a lawsuit? So that's kind of what I mean by other states and cities and towns taking note of this. So
could somebody now from another state say, well, hang on a minute, look, this is what's happened in the Singer case. I think what you guys are doing is ridiculous. Should groups of people be going out to do that now? Packs of 107 pilots going down to hunt down the regulators.
Well, I think you should, in a very professional manner, forward this information to your elected officials who have already passed a drone law or who are considering a drone law, and that let them think about it.
Okay, and how much would it ruin their day then? This case.
That depends. There's a lot of interesting things that could happen there. I don't. That's probably outside of the scope of kind of what we've been talking about. But there's you know, you get the black eye. I mean, if there's an election coming up, then you look like you're potentially wasting a lot of taxpayer resources and fighting these trying to protect laws or creating laws that don't really need to be created. So there's some ramifications for creating these laws or not amending these laws. Okay.
I'm not sure how long everyone's going, but I think we should keep going. Patrick, I interrupted you when the others were leaving. You were about to, I think, about to talk about advocacy, which was something Steve was talking to a few moments before. So perhaps if you're so minded, you could pick that up again.
Yeah, well, you know, I wanted to say, don't despair, okay? You know, and earlier we were talking about, you know, there's like this standoff, you know, and I don't know if anybody here has seen The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, but they have that shootout scene at the end with the three people, and it's kind of the same situation. We have like the Congress, the FAA, and the end user, you know, and everybody's waiting for somebody to make a move. And that's kind of made things drag on for years and years. But on the advocacy thing, Steve, you know, when I started this with the RCAPA back 2003, 4, you can go back and look at some of the posts on RC groups, and people rip me up one side and down the other. The FAA is never going to regulate the hobby. God, you guys are crazy. They'll never regulate drones. God, you got the tinfoil hats. You know, it took the it took the FAA basically coming out and saying we're going to do something before people said, "Uh-oh, wait, we got to do something." But unfortunately, in our society, most people do not understand how federal regulation works, how aviation works, how rulemaking works. Okay. And we have a big situation. You maybe, you know, you get some of that over what I say on social media and in these articles, but like the good one is that no more backroom drone deals. People that have money and lobbyists get to talk to the FAA, and people say, you don't know what's going on here. You're not, you know, a part of the sidebar deals or the back office meetings or whatever. You know, yeah, you're right. I'm not, because I'm not going to be a part of that. And I'm not going to be a part of selling people out, but I'm not there to make deals. My thing has always been, hey, we got to make this as open and accessible to as many people as possible. And that's not what I see. Fortunately, yeah.
Sorry, Patrick, but at the end of the day, haven't we sort of got a responsibility to have a few people in the room, like David's at the ICAO thing now, and I think Steve and the Doug are they've been in a few meetings, and that doesn't come cheaply. So Steve and co have got to fork out. Surely we have to have a few people in the room, even if you don't agree with that. Otherwise, how are you going to know what's actually been said and the truth of what's going on?
Well, you're not, and what's going to go on? I mean, what happens is they get you to kind of wither on the vine. I mean, even us at SUAS News. I mean, a lot of the things that I was doing and going to here were funded by, you know, advertisers and supporters and whatnot of SUAS News, which I think a lot of people don't understand. We also, Gary and myself, have used this as a platform to try and assist a global community. We're not, you know, I make jokes about carpetbaggers and whatever else, but I really feel that SUAS News, and my hat's off to you too, Gary, have done more for the global integration effort than almost all the other groups combined. I'm serious, man. Nobody has got the stones to say the stuff that we print or publish at SUAS News. And that's just all there is to it. I don't care. I mean, you know that, like, for instance, the U.S. Army document. That has, there are two camps on that. One, hey, you know, you did a real service. You guys are really helping the community out. And other people are, you're destroying DJI sales. hey man, we're just it's called the news, and we're doing that. But anyway, you got to keep people honest. The other thing is I wanted to touch on this too, is the ID, or not the ID and tracking arc, but the DAC. There's two ideas being floated in a task group there, and I talk about this private public rulemaking. But let's throw it out here. Here's an advocacy deal. Who thinks that local law enforcement should enforce the FARs? Or who thinks that local law enforcement should enforce the FARs to 200 feet? I think it's a bad idea in both counts. Well,
unfortunately, I wanted to. I'm sorry, I'm stopping you, but I almost wanted to say, really, to Dr. Singer and the others. Well, what's the next fight? And that's where I was going to take that. Unfortunately, as great as the Taylor case and this case has been, and it's been the right things, and it was the right thing to do.
I would argue that this is the first case. The Taylor case is a procedural.
Yeah, but it had to be done. They had to be kept honest. They had to be kept honest. You've got to start somewhere.
We're watching.
Sorry, that might have been a bit offensive, Steve. Sorry, so these are great, but there are bigger fights coming. This was just the start, and our official advocacy groups have been nowhere. And the amicus brief, but perhaps that was filed because they were seen to not to support the Taylor case, and wanted to get a hat and a ring. I don't know. Maybe I'm taking that approach too far.
I think that there's a pragmatism afoot with the people in the room. The other CBO, the policy people from different manned aviation, scale aviation. They operate on a more pragmatic level. At least when it came to the Taylor case. That, that's kind of the rule, but you know what, let's just make something so it's not worse at another time. And, that's sort of, I understand the logic, and I am nothing if not pragmatic at times, but I just think that's, I hate to make the logical fallacy, slippery slope analogy, but it seems wrong. It seems like you've got to do it the right way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know, Jonathan and Dr. Singer, I don't know, can I tempt you out? Jonathan's very hard to tempt out of his shell. Have you got any opinions on what the next big case might be, Your Honor, my lord? No.
All right, I'd like to throw something out there, though, if I could, just an issue that we're trying to work on with the Doug, and we don't know if we have what could be constituted as a case. We're looking for a Fairfax County or a Virginia attorney, or the possibility of getting an attorney. We're not in that place yet. This is all very new, but our DC Doug president, and many of you guys know him, Chris Vo, who's PhD robot scientist, brilliant person, very well considered person. And so he's did a demo for the Fairfax County, Virginia Parks Department last week as a means of opening up Fairfax parks for the purposes of providing educational programming around drones and for recreational drone flight. And from what I understand, there's a preemption rule that, you cannot preempt FAA rule on the books in Fairfax County that will expire in 2019. And while the demo went very, very well, he's feeling like, I think like Patrick had said, they're just running out the clock. They're stonewalling him. They're like, nice. Yeah, we can't schedule that just yet. It's I've got dental surgery, whatever. And what is our recourse? I mean, we did consult with Loretta a little bit. She's on our board, and she's saying that with parks they can rule about takeoff and landing. I guess that's considered navigation, and so that would kind of put the kibosh on flight in parks if they don't allow takeoff and landing of aircraft. So we're looking to drill down further into this, and while we're here, let's maybe someone like John could point us in a direction. How's that for baiting?
He's not. He's very hard to hold. Very hard.
He's elusive.
Well, let me just say strategically, if you have any plan to litigate this, it might not be good to discuss your strategy online where the defendant can review it before they respond to you.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I mean, we're really in the very, like, we don't even know if we want to do that. You know what I mean? Our resources are so slim. You know.
Well, that actually is a great question right there. I mean, what's the resources? How much gumption do you have to pick a fight? Because at the end of the day, I mean, with Singer, right? I mean, like, Michael, how much time did you have to invest in actually researching this? I mean, was this like, let's say, you know, maybe a weekend, a couple weekends, a lot of weekends, right? How much time did it take you to actually kind of research this to a competent level?
It was a very long time, and not just the legal research, but dealing with papers, with court filings. The city did file a couple of procedural motions to try to have evidence disallowed and papers ignored and so on, and it took a long time. I don't know how many hundreds of hours, but that might be too much, but 100, 200 hours probably. Yeah.
Well, and you're making it. Go ahead.
Well, it's not to be taken lightly, like to try to do a lawsuit, because you either do it right or you don't do it. Because if you just jump in, and many people I've seen on Facebook and whatever are always willing to try to volunteer my time to pick a lawsuit, fight in their local area. But I'm like, wow, you just want to like right away 100 hours of my life, or at the end of the day, we need to consider, like, if you don't do it right, you botch it up, and then you look stupid, and then you potentially have some bad case law that then everyone after the fact has to deal with. And then, like, oh great, well, the Massachusetts one went great, but then let's say the Connecticut one, that guy was a little goofy, but he didn't really have all the facts, and no one really knew drone law, and so that should have been went a different way. And so you can end up causing a lot of problems if you're just too quick to jump in. And so,
well, I want to be clear that I'm just looking for, I'm looking for strategy. I'm not going to the mattresses, if you'll welcome the Godfather reference, but we're not just slamming, stepping on the gas full. We want to make friends. We don't want to be adversarial. We want to educate and ultimately, kumbaya, cooperation.
Yeah.
That's really where it's at.
There are no friends in federal law rulemaking. You either got to decide that you want to be a grassroots group, and the legal fight thing is you just don't have the staying power to do it. It's whack-a-mole across the country. Yep. You got to demand to be part of the public rulemaking process, and I think you guys have somebody on there now, but these guys don't play a square game. That's number one. FAA does not play a square game. They'll shake your hand. They'll make a guarantee. 2 seconds later, that's right out the window. I've witnessed it personally. The thing you have to do is you got to get in the effort. You have to motivate your users to give you money. If they don't want to give you money, they're not interested,
Mm-hmm. And where can they give you money, Steve? I'm sure they can give you money. Hang on, let's find out. Can we give you money, Steve?
I have posted a link to our safety code, which if you're on the site, you can go to the donate, but I will also post a donate to Doug link. Here we go.
Please do. Well done, Patrick. Nice lead in.
Well, hey, this brings up another issue about, kind of going back to what was brought up there about, like, hey, what's the viability of this? And, well, Michael brought up, originally right there at the very beginning about that there's a bunch of different issues that were raised that the judge never even got into. And so while the judge chose to completely, he didn't answer certain issues, like express preemption and field preemption. Those are still issues that are still lingering out there. And so in trying to, see how this impacts other areas, there's still other things that were never fully discussed. And so, like, Michael, what are some of those issues that you can think about that weren't properly raised, or I guess even addressed by Judge Young in the ruling?
Sure. So I'll just make a background comment that it's typical for a court, as you know, Jonathan, choose a grounds for ruling that can answer the question without delving into every possible cause of action raised by the plaintiff. So I felt that the opinion was very cohesive and took a complicated set of questions and explained them in a simple way. So I was very pleased with that. But of course, I wanted to bring to bear as many arguments as I could to the lawsuit. And so some issues that I raised, for instance, there's state preemption in Massachusetts. This was discussed to some extent during oral arguments, but the court decided not to raise that in the decision. There's also these questions of airspace. You know, over Newton, there's actually Class B airspace over parts of Newton that extend from the ground, from the surface, up to 400 feet and above. And so there's this question. You know, Newton was certainly regulating within, not only within national and navigable airspace, but also within controlled airspace. So those are a couple of the key issues that I raised. And then there's this whole separate issue of right of navigation. So in 49 USC 40103, there is a statutory right of transit. And in Massachusetts law, there's a statute that provides that the navigable airspace is open for navigation. And so a separate prong of my argument was that the ordinance interfered with freedom of navigation, and the court chose not to take up that issue. And I think it would have required a very technical study of what navigable airspace means. And as I think we're all aware, there are a lot of ambiguities today about what a navigable airspace might mean, since it's defined by reference to other statutes that specify minimum altitudes. And of course, for unmanned aircraft, there is no minimum altitude.
So what's the bottom line? I apologize for the darkness to my right. I'm coming to you from my teenage son's room. This is a solar powered room, and he's not charged these lights over here. So
shocking.
I need to write down the offence there, and I will get him later. But it's mood lighting now. It's mood lighting. So Jonathan, sort of really on a whole then, moving forward, if groups are going to pick a fight, they better pick a fight they consider they're going to win, not put it out there on social media, and really put the hours in on that. Use part of this work that Dr. Singer's undertaken, and nail the next one, so that we're 3 for 3 when it comes to the big cases, not some dodgy, weird old effort. I don't know. I didn't put that very well. You see if you can do a better job than me, Jonathan.
Oh, I agree. Do you want to mention your game plan on social media or on SUAS News podcast, right? Our show, and then setting up the right situation, picking the right jurisdiction. So venue shopping might be a really good thing to consider. Do we want to pick a fight in the 9th Circuit or maybe the 2nd or 3rd Circuit, which has the most favorable type of preemption language? That's very important as well, because if you pick a fight in an area where preemption case law is not so well, then, not so good for you, then you potentially, now it's 2-1, right? And you're like, so there's a lot to think about here. And just also we need to think about, like, well, based upon how this judge ruled, what are some other things that he could have ruled upon, and how do those play into what was going on here? So for instance, there's what happens is Newton can now go back and they can change their law. And that's going to be problematic, because then you can see this happening more so in the future, where it's like, hey, they'll change it, and then hope maybe Singer doesn't file again, or maybe hope that it wasn't as overbearing the second time around, so another judge doesn't strike it down as conflict preempted. And so what happens if it's not a complete ban? What if it's just like a a prohibition or requiring permission for flight, maybe let's say 100 feet over somebody's property? Or what if it's requiring permission from the property owner or the city in the event that you're flying in Cosby airspace? Right, there's other cases and issues and stuff here that were not even addressed that definitely start affecting this going forward, that I think Singer and I and other attorneys and stuff are going to be thinking about for a long time to come here, of how does this play out? Because in reality, we don't really fully know all the implications of this law. There's about 2 weeks from now, I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go, oh, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, there was something that could have been done differently here, right? Or, hey, maybe you want to set up a test case here in this such situation, so as we can force the hand of the judge to answer only on the grounds of, let's say, field preemption or express preemption of navigable airspace, or the national airspace, I mean. And so those are some of we have to kind of understand this, digest this, and then think about maybe moving forward, because there were just a ton of issues here that haven't been raised, and this judge, answered the question in a somewhat narrow manner without going too overboard, because this is a big issue that is out there that no one really wants to try to tackle. And so, Michael did a great job at going after this, and the judge did a really good job at answering this. But there's still stuff left on the table, and if we want to try to get other types of rulings that are much more favorable, such as express preemption or field preemption type of rulings, then there's going to be some chess playing done at that point, because other judges are more likely probably just follow the same path and just say, hey, this is conflict preempted, but you could just go re-and-do it, right? Oh, maybe just don't register the drones. Oh, crud. Well, they got some maybe operational restrictions. And what happens if they start saying, hey, well, you got to do everything the FAA says? Is that conflict preempted? That opens a whole other discussion into another area of conflict preemption. So
I don't understand. Just unpack that for me. What does that mean? Just do everything the FAA says? I don't understand.
Well, right. Okay, so the of conflict preemption, you have two types of conflict preemption. You have where it substantially frustrates the implementation of the federal law, and then you have where there's an incongruity. The second type is where you have an incongruity of the actual enforcement of the violation of that law. So without tipping my hand, and because there's probably going to be somebody that's going to be trying to listen to this, I'm going to see some of that secret sauce later on those days.
Okay.
But there's some stuff there that's another level of issues to the question, because they get around the conflict preemption, right? Because if they say, if Newton's like, well, you have to register with us, and then now all of a sudden they change it 1 second later to say you have to register with the FAA. And is that really like conflict preempted? Because now the FAA is back to being the sole exclusive register of unmanned aircraft. So that's what I'm saying. That issue right there is another one that's going to have to be addressed in going forward. So these cities and towns and counties and states are just going to play almost like, if you will, a battleship game, right? Hit, miss, hit, miss, and then, right. And then you'll kind of, after a while, come up with some like model legislation or model ordinance drafting from somebody out there. And then that'll have to get taken down. And so this is just the beginning of what's to come. But Michael did a great job he did a great job at taking care of this. He didn't whiff. He did a great job, and I applaud him for that.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say, I'm not sure I see this turning into a cycle where operators and municipalities are trying to outsmart each other with successive sets of regulations. I think if there's any outcome from this case, it will encourage municipalities to study their proposed regulations and to invite industry and technical and legal input before they enact it. And I expect that will reduce a lot of the tension that we've seen up until now in municipal rulemaking.
I just want to say in the comments, Dreamsmith says business clients are not going to be interested in drone law problems. They're interested in cheaper, faster, better. And these laws are effectively reducing, if not stealing, that competitive advantage. But I wanted to say to that, and maybe you loyalty types could jump in on this as well, is surely any business hiring a drone operator should be very interested in how that operation is and how it's complying with the law. It would be of great interest to them to make sure it's legal.
Yeah, maybe even more when you have some sort of, enforcement policy that works. I don't know. I see a lot of people out there that are operating outside of the law and making money. So people that want to do it legally, you're the one paying attention to the law.
Yes, or whoever. But then I was also going to say, do you think the FAA has taken notice of this case?
Yes.
Have you got a short answer to that? That was a bit complicated.
Okay, I'll make a shorter answer. Yeah.
Well, and going back, after listening to what Jonathan said, I mean, all of that is anybody that's ever paid for professional services. There's groping around in the dark, shots in the dark, unknown outcomes, and all the rest of that. And that's why I've got to say, you got to go back to the public rulemaking process. One other thing I wanted to say with the donations is, a lot of people, it was hard. When I started with the RCAPA thing, we said, hey, we want to try and get $35 a year from people. Oh, you're going to be spending my money at Hooters or, $35 bucks.
Fair comment, yeah.
Yeah, but, $35 doesn't go far. When I was on the ARC, when I was on the small UAS ARC, I was on several of the small, the subgroups, one of them being a hobby and whatever else. That turned into calls 4 days a week. It turned into a full-time job. So when you're donating to groups like Doug and Grassroots, they got to send someone to be on one of these committees and be prepared, just like you do for a law case or whatever.
If I may jump in from just personal experience or maybe relating another person's personal experience. Our policy director, Kenji Sugihara, sits on the UAS ID ARC. And we had tried to raise funds for him he lives in Oregon, to travel back and forth. He spent weeks on Chris Bo's couch in the DC region.
Yep.
We're just not equipped to fund it. And he's right now doing it out of pocket. And it's, that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be. We're between Kenji and perhaps one other representative on the ARC, we're the only people at that table who actually operate drones, who actually use drones.
Well, that's one of the problems that you have. And you also have a deal where you're sleeping on somebody's couch. You're not prepared to go into the dogfight.
No.
When I was on it, or when I was involved, people were like, "Oh, that Egan guy is outspoken. He's coarse. He's gruff." Yeah, you know what? I'll pay for this out of my pocket. I spent $2,500 to be here and have you people blow smoke up my skirt or whatever you want to call it. And when you're sitting here and you're going to go on and, whatever, chew the fat and chuckle and snicker and all the rest of that, that's costing me money. Somebody's not sending me a check. So that's another thing with the standards groups. Oh, go work with the ASTM. My first ASTM meeting was in 2005. It's 2017, man.
We were on the same call. It didn't take long to get off that, did it?
Yeah. So, exactly. It's the same. It's the same thing. Even the DAC, you go back there, it's the same assumptions, man. So we're talking about, this has been going on for 25 years. People don't realize that. They don't realize what it costs. They don't realize what's at stake. Now, and one other thing I have to say, as we go down the road here, it's like the breadcrumbs that Hansel and Gretel left out. As the rules start to get made, it is literally going to take an act of Congress to change things. So when you're donating to grassroots groups and you think, well, I'm going to send them $10, that's what you're investing in your future. You don't want to fly at the AMA field. You don't like flying at the park. You don't like flying at all. Just that, whatever you decide to invest is the return that you're going to get. And I'm not going to talk about the qualifications of people that are there or whatever, but just think about that when you're donating. And, I'm off the soapbox.
I just want to jump onto that soapbox as well and say that the biggest thing that people have yet to convince me that it's a good thing. And you touched on it earlier. And I think the biggest fight that we're going to have is UTM. And yes, it's a good idea to all be seen on a screen. And yes, it's a good idea to all keep out of the way. I get it. I love it. I understand. I completely get that. But is that what they really want? Or do they really want to make it a pay-to-play Sky for an unnecessary reason? We haven't had that big collision yet. We haven't had that big crash. It will happen in a million years or whatever. But that isn't coming. And they're basing... UTM is the Silicon Valley. I am ranting now. The Silicon Valley crowd trying to find, I've forgotten the phrase, when you try and find an excuse for software or a job or whatever.
Or a problem.
That's it. Yes, a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sorry?
I do have to step off, and I want to thank you for having me.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for everything you did, the hundreds of hours you put in for the community. And I hope we all, whenever it's now an SUSU's mandatory rule that happened in the Taylor case, and it applies to yourself as well, if anyone meets you in a bar, they have to buy you a beer. It is the law. I will accept nothing less. So thank you very, very, very much for everything you did. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you all. Take care. Goodbye.
Same here. Thanks.
Yeah.
And now you opened up the can of UTM, Gary. I'm ready to go. So do you have a few minutes?
Well, till this next light goes out, yeah.
Okay. Till it goes totally dark.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've talked to, and that was another article I wrote about the global, the Intergalactic UTM Association. So everyone's talking about, we need registration, we need UTM, we need all of this. Now, again, back to what I said earlier, when you say, we have, 800 plus minus 1,000 drones, it sounds like we need, look at this, we need a UTM system. Taking a refreshment. Maybe that sounds like it. But now, he's moving on to now what we have
Firebird IPA.
Yeah, the Firebird. Yeah. The big stuff. Now what we have is a situation where we have 77,000 registered commercial drones. Do we, my question is, how many of those are in the air at one time? Half, a third, a quarter, 10%, whatever? Are you really telling me you got to have a UTM system all around the country? Or should it be a situation where we have somebody in Corn Bluff, Iowa, who's doing agricultural work, who has another endorsement on his certificate that says, he's qualified to talk on the radio, knows how to file a flight plan. He's flying 15 miles away from Corn Bluff, and he's going to fly 1,000 acres of soybean. Do we really need a UTM system out there? And then the other thing we talk about is the cost. I got to tell you, I think this whole deal is people like Amazon and Google were trying to get the taxpayer to pony up I think it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars to build a realistic traffic management system. And then, I've heard 10 million or 20 million. I think that's what it would cost to certify it. This idea you're going to click on a cell phone and just walk away and the thing is going to work seamlessly, in my estimation's a fairy tale. I think you got people, the cabal, you said the Silicon Valley crowd, I call it a cabal. There's definitely a cabal here that are all working together to try and push their products, and they don't care what it costs the end user. The end user can't fly anywhere but the AMA field. Nobody even cares. They don't care about you. And then when you go to
that's what the community don't realize. That is what's being said. That's what's being said. And that's why you do need either yourself or someone from Steve's group in the room. You need somebody in the room to hear what's being said, and that costs money. And yes, you said it earlier. The community has been. Our actual tagline in SOS News should be "ignored by the community since 2008." That's what we should just put up there.
Well, they're not. We are not ignored. People read this SUS News every day, and stuff happens, and I get phone calls all the time. I saw that article that was on SUS News, and what does this mean? And oh my God, it's not only something where somebody has to be in the room. you know, I've been trying, or I tried repeatedly to get on the UAS ARC that is still going on from 2011, which was started in secret and all the rest of that. And, you know, the DOD vendors wanted to keep me off of that. We're not going to talk about smalls. We're not going to talk about commercial. We're not going to, and that was all lies. I think it was Epic FOIA'd the minutes from the meetings, and they were talking about smalls and commercial and everything else. So the deal is it's just a situation where the end user, and I hate to kind of let the air out of your sails there, Steve, they don't care about you unless Congress tells them, gets them on the phone to start caring about you. And there's a way to do the grassroots deal. But AUVSI, I mean, this one, you know, 2011, Congress told them you can put whatever language you want into the reauthorization bill, the 2012 reauthorization bill. And I submitted language for an under 4-pound exemption. And the powers that be at AUVSI said, doesn't take all the members into consideration. We're not supporting that. Have a nice day. Okay. You know, you could have been in the air. People don't know what's going on. People think that they go to these shows, these people get up on stage and they tell them everything that they're doing and it's great and God, we're working for you. That's not true. It's really not true. But anyway,
we do tend to be Debbie Downers, unfortunately, and that's
Debbie reality. You know?
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's not good on the. People don't rush the downers, but Steve, do you want to respond then to that? How are you going to get your crowd excited?
You know, that's a really good question. You know, our resources, and I see Patrick chuckling. I mean, our resources are slim. Our time even slimmer. We're it's the chicken and egg once again. I think the way to do it is to somehow build in a value proposition outside of advocacy, whether it's insurance or something else, to motivate people to become a part of a larger group that actually has some chops. I mean, the other CBO at the moment, you know, they have a conflicted and contradictory constituency. I think they're trying to modernize, but I think that it's tough. And you know, that is something that we're working on with them in a sense to keep a line of communication open. But it's you know, you've got a populace that is buying a device from Best Buy and, you know, or some other big box store, and you know, they're not really there's a disconnect between that and putting that in the sky and being and you know, knowing what you're supposed to be doing. So it's sort of like the digitization of our society, where craftsmanship and other things that went along with you know, the things like desktop publishing and all that sort of stuff, and the film and music industries, and how digitization, you know, sort of took that away. I mean, it's a parallel, but it's not a very good one, I guess. But in any case,
you've taken away the craft of hand making a model aircraft over hundreds and hundreds of hours in your shed.
It's not the craft. It's not the craft so much as what the craft teaches you. I don't really like. You don't.
Sure, yes.
It's more about the knowledge of the systems and the capabilities, yes, and, you know, for lack of a better term, the flight envelope and what your capabilities are. You know, hold my beer. Yes. You know, is not where we want to be. You know, so
well, it's what I meant by that, where I was going to take that craft, was because you've put hundreds of hours into it, hundreds and hundreds of hours into it. Perhaps you then you are invested in not crashing and making sure it works right, and that, yes, and as you say, all the other skills, and you'll go and learn the skills. But wait, I think. Go on.
There's one other point on that, and I think that this is the big point that's being missed. You know, when they talk about, we've got to educate the community. When you talk to the AMA, you're preaching to the choir. The community that needs to be educated is the person that goes into Best Buy and buys a drone.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Steve said. Yeah.
Oh, hold on, because on the registration arc, you know, the drone registration task force that FAA threw together, Best Buy was there and a couple other chain stores, and here was them advocating for the drone community. If the registration doesn't happen at the point of sale, you do whatever you want. Have a nice day. We're out of here. So when I've been at Best Buy and I talk to the girl in the aisle there and I go, hey, how many of these drones do you have? Oh, I can't afford one. Do you have any drones? Yeah, I have some drones. You need a license if you do this commercially? Really? I never heard that, Oh, okay. So here, come in, buy your drone, go fly it around, go to the airport, go nuts. I'm not saying that's what they're advocating for, but the responsibility should be on the box store. It's the same thing. There was a community. Everybody's been into the hobby shop. You go into the hobby shop, the dude behind the counter kind of tells you about what's kind of going on in the community locally. Oh, hey, did you hear the FAA, blah, blah. That's not happening at Best Buy and Walmart, Target, or Apple, or the rest of these places.
My local hobby shop owner is too depressed to really have a conversation. So
he's probably depressed because sales are like way down. Thank you, registration task force. But
no, it's more like nobody's buying from brick and mortar for this stuff. Maybe big box, but it's more like just the demise of the local hobby shop. Period. So I could see.
Well,
that's
didn't I see that Toys R Us are in trouble, aren't they? So I mean, it's unfortunately.
So why don't manufacturers put in at least documentation that states the user's responsibility? Why can't they put that in the box?
Nobody reads the instruction. Nobody reads any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how you do it, but that's not really, I'm not the guy selling these things. But I will say this. Sales are down. These companies are losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Even DJI, the sales are down. There was an article that came out of China. They're saying it's the regulatory part of this. I don't think they realize the damage that they're doing to themselves. They are going along with some of this stuff. They don't understand what it all means, like the Drone Registration Task Force. Go along with all of that. It's detrimental to themselves. I mean, I was in a mall, and on the monitors, it was saying $27,000 fine from the FAA if you don't register your drone. You think, might as well go buy your kid a gun, and get in less trouble. I'm being facetious, of course, but I'm not going to go buy a toy for the kid that he could get into that kind of trouble with. So I think they shot themselves in the foot. The education needs to be from the manufacturer. I don't think that there's a social contract there. And the people at Best Buy selling them, there is nothing there that, they do have the AMA membership. So you got to give them that. Same at Fry's. There's no disclaimer that, hey, you may need a license for this. Or even when there was registration that you need to register your aircraft.
But at the end of the day, what we could talk about, we could be saying there could have been 1 million DJI whatever sold last year, but how many of them are not in a tree at the bottom of a lake or whatever? How many have actually, how many are actually out there flying as well? Sales is one thing, and how many are just in a box in a cupboard somewhere because little Johnny is not at all interested in it? I think it's interesting that just the sheer number of press releases and stories and interest in the story. If we put a drone story out 5 years ago and it got slash dotted, that was an instant 100 to 200,000 hits. If we get slash dotted now, it's 10 to 20,000 hits. The interest is gone. It's gone. It's over. It's happened. It's done. It's which is great. The industry is growing up. So I think, again, moving back to the UTM sort of thing, are we really catering to as many drones as people think we are? Are there really that many out there? Are there really that many that active? And do we really need? And what annoys me the most is it means my 13-year-old son would be in a position where every time he goes out in the field here, his flight would be reported and whatever. It's just nonsense. It makes no sense at all. Do air traffickers want every drone that's flying for 10 minutes to pop up on their screen? Do aircraft want that to happen? No, they don't. They don't want it. They haven't got the bandwidth for every on a nice day. It's just silly. It's silly, and it's
well, Gary,
software. Go on.
You hit on a point that people don't realize, and it's one of the reasons that your GA people don't want ADSB. If you are being tracked and ID'd, if you fly in an area where you're not, or you fly into an area or cut a corner or whatever, or weather or whatever, and you violate the FARs, it is recorded. Now, it is. And so, this is the same deal with ADSB. So it's tracked and recorded, and you can go back and crack people for that, that have, let's say, infractions or whatever. Now, the other thing with that is they talk about this ID and tracking before you fly over people. And my thing is to me, the bigger concern is the engineering. We say that right now there's about a 1 in 74 hour mean time between failure with drones. The consumer stuff, I've heard numbers of 1 in 25. If you're going to fly over people, your engineering is going to have to get better. And everybody's like, oh, well, we have mitigators. We have a parachute, you know, and that'll be the 100% solution for the 25% solution. That's not what it's supposed to be. Your engineering has to come up, and there's certification scuttlebutt, but we've known that since, you know, a long time ago. The quality of the engineering is going to have to come up if you want to fly over people. I don't think people are going to tolerate drones falling on their head. And I think that's more important than ID and tracking. Okay, well, Steve, you guys have got a person on the ID and tracking. What's Doug's position on that?
Our position is to make it as the least intrusive and most preserving of privacy that it can possibly be. In theory, do we think tracking needs to happen? Not so sure. Close range Bluetooth, something like that would, like you say, pop up as needed is probably the way to go. And de-identified is really where we would suggest as well. And I mean, I'm not privy to the activity of the ARC. That's you know, not our information to know yet. But that's the position we have going in, is that you know, we want to preserve the privacy and make it the least, you know, intrusive that it can be.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I was just going to say to you. Sorry, Patrick. I was going to say to you. While you're here, do we want to reveal any of the certification noise that's currently out there that will get shot down for every time we mention it?
Yeah, I mean, we could. I mean, it's coming, and I mean, that might be a whole nother show where we could produce the documents and talk about that, because there is information out there that you could look to, and there's also video from the 2014 SUSB Expo. My whole, well, not my whole presentation, but a lot of my presentation dealt with that, talked about the documentation, talked about what was going to be necessary and what it would do to the cost for this industry. Now, one other point on the ID and tracking ARC, I got to tell you, scuttlebutt out there on the boards, you know, the DJI has started the bug bounty. People are reporting bugs. Bugs have been found. Vulnerabilities have been found. I don't want to go into detail because people are trying to collect on this, but now it is getting to a point where people believe that DJI is stonewalling them and not paying out, and that they were just buying time for the ID and tracking ARC. I know, shocked.
So hang on. Just explain that again. What do you mean buying time? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, what part of it? Because I covered a lot of
all of it. Well, what do you mean? So the
bug bounty was like,
the bug bounty came out.
Right.
And they did that because they were going onto the tracking ARC, and that makes them the good guys. And that was the only reason they're doing.
The bug bounty was a result of some of the stuff that Kevin Finisterre
did.
And some of the vulnerabilities that he found. And then after the Army document came out, you know, things started to happen. So DJI said, okay, we're going to offer up a bug bounty. And so all of these people that had already had vulnerabilities found or were finding vulnerabilities have been emailing into the, you know, bug bounty at DJI.com or whatever it is, and they're not getting any response. They're not getting payouts. They're not getting responses. They're not getting any feedback. So now people are starting to feel that it was just a ruse to buy a little time for them to put a bow on the ID and tracking ARC. I'm just going to say that more vulnerabilities have been found with DJI software, and I don't want to go into it because people are trying to collect on that. But let's say the news would have an adverse effect on their credibility for ID and tracking. The other thing I don't like about ID and tracking and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all the rest of that is it can be hacked and spoofed. And the toy company, as far as I'm concerned, has proven themselves not to be up to the task for something that's supposedly going to ensure the safety and we know who's flying, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they're up to that task. They've proven themselves not to be up to that task.
Oh, okay. I'll just put it out as the complaints come to Gary at susnews.com.
Well,
Here I go.
that's just
It's Friday. I've got to be here. It's Friday night. You've just ruined my weekend, but there we are. Dreamsmith in the comments says, so with all of this, this is a good question actually. What should our top 3 goals be in order to make this a workable environment for commercial drones? It's a very, very good question. Do we still have a lawyer as a lawyer on a treadmill? What would his top 3? What would his top 3? Let's start with you. What's your top 3? What do you think the top? That's a good question. What would the top 3 goals be in order to make this a workable environment for commercial drones?
I think the number 1 priority would be primarily getting some preemption language, express preemption language, from the U.S. Congress. That would be number 1. Number 2 would probably be getting the regulations moving over people and beyond visual line of sight. That's going to require a waiver from the director of the Office of Management and Budget. Well, it's actually an exemption to keep that moving on, so that way they don't have to comply with President Trump's 2-for-1 executive order. I think those are probably and the third one would be the FAA to reverse their policy on their current enforcement policy regarding drone operators. I think there should be a greater amount of enforcements that should really happen here against the drone operators, as well as the individuals who hire the drone operators that are operating not in accord with the federal aviation regulations.
So you think they should go after them to make sure that if you're operating completely legally right now with your 107 and doing a good job, it does seem a little bit unfair that they're not going after certain people. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And because some industries, they just hire you, and then if you say that's dangerous, they fire you, and then they hire the next guy. And they just keep kind of pushing everybody through as a subcontractor. I think that the FAA should seriously start looking into the ability to go after the individuals who are hiring these drone operators. And I think there's some legal liability things that can attach there, depending upon the circumstances, where they can maybe go after those individuals. And they need to make an example of those larger companies with some big numbers.
Steve, what would your top 3 be?
Oof, that's a tough one. Give me 1 sec. I'm sorry, I was a little distracted for a moment there. But I mean, you're talking about top 3 goals in order to make it a workable environment for commercial drones. So I would argue that my goal, I think commercial drones, yes, they require advocacy. I think that top 1 for me is to preserve 336 for recreational modelers, and to keep that carved out, because I think there's a big push in Congress, at least, to really just get rid of that, and to make everyone 107 compliant. And I think that puts an age cap of 16. You've got to be 16. Kind of bites into the educational realm, and I'm an educator with a day off today, and I'm teaching my students all about unmanned systems on land and sea and air, and so I've got students that would want to fly drones and do. I can't give you a top 3, and what I do have to do actually is I do have to sign off. I've got a hard out at 1
yes,
p.m.
Well, we definitely will. I was gonna, because it was such a great question. I was going to end on this and let Patrick do the ending, because he'll take hours. So you'll be clear away. You'll be clear away, Steve. And what I wanted to say to your point there about
336.
I think about 336. I think it also speaks to that UTM conversation and to delivery drones. And I think the people that would like, I think people that would like delivery drones to be happening, I want the hobbyists gone, and they want them out of the sky.
Oh,
and they're the people that are putting a lot of pressure with a lot of money behind them. to get that, and that's the 330. You're right, Bob, right, and it's so short-sighted, isn't it? We should be thinking about that 10-year-old who's going to have the next fantastic idea. He's going to have an idea none of us have thought about, and it's going to be, we're going to nip it in the bud. You're going to nip innovation. I'm ranting, or getting off my ranting high horse, but you're going to nip innovation in the bud. You cannot be allowed to happen. I'll stop
and
there.
That role, the role that those students will take on, one would hope, and I've talked about this before, is that, you know, the vanishing middle class, this could be a way to kind of prop up a little bit more of a middle class occupation group, you know, a set. So it's really, it is very short-sighted, and it's all about greed.
Yeah, but, absolutely. That's a great way for you to have to depart and leave. It's all about greed. Thank you very much, Steve, for taking the time at short notice to join us. Hopefully we'll speak to you again soon. You have a lovely weekend, and
thanks.
You take
Thanks.
care.
Talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right, then, Patrick. We've lined you up. Top 3. Hit it out of the park before we depart.
I think a lot of it has already been covered in today's, you know, hangout. One of them, though, I will say that any regulation should be based on risk analysis, and I'm talking scientific. Over and over again, we've seen a situation where policy has been made knee-jerk, hypothetical numbers. I mean, you even saw the, you know, some of the estimates that the FAA made. There's going to be 1,000,006 drones flying in the NAS, and I mean, they're all telephone numbers. The other thing that I think that the community has done itself a disservice is with the hype. I mean, a few years ago, you want more hate mail? Farm drones. Nobody knew what that meant. But it hasn't really panned out. And I got to be honest with you. I do not believe that beyond visual line of sight is going to cure all of the economic ills for drones. I just don't think it's
you guys have just got lucky, haven't you, with 2 natural disasters in a row that suddenly kept a load of, not lucky for the people that it happened to, but just kept a lot of 107s afloat. No pun intended.
No pun intended.
But you know, without that, a lot of them would have been in trouble now. And this is we've just had the first post Part 107 growing season. So if the farm story doesn't happen this year, it ain't never going to happen.
Well, the bottom line is they need, and they've always, you know, said this with the regulatory grade data or whatever, your data needs to be more valuable. Pictures of fields or pictures of construction sites, there's some value to it, but is it really enough to warrant all of the extra effort and regulation and maybe certification that's coming down? I don't think so.
Rory Paul will say, you know, it's all depends on crop value, and at the moment it's all too cheap. There's no value in doing it. As soon as it gets hyper expensive, then yes, it'll make a difference. But right now, not so much. And here we spoke about it the other day, but there was a startup here in Cape Town who was all ag drone, and they've quickly pivoted to offering data for 300 rand is, I don't know, but it's not even $30 a month. They'll do your entire farm, but what are they using? They're using the free satellite data from the European satellite, and it's at 10-meter resolution, 10-meter square resolution. But you can have your whole farm done, 2 reports a month, $30 a month. Thank you very much. You know, right. It's
a race to the bottom. If you have AI or algorithms that can spot anomalies, make reports, and I've said this for years, until the time comes where the drone is pretty much autonomous and not pre-programmed, but autonomous, goes out and flies, comes back, analyzes its own data, sends a 2-paragraph problem and solution set to your email that you can jump on the phone and tell your ranch manager or farm manager, you got to go over here, you got to do, all right, have a good day, all right, bye. You know, then you got people are going to,
that's it. Yep.
Right now, you got some guy who's got a great attitude, and he's going to come out and fly your rice field or your soybeans and show you some pictures of something that's crop stress that you can do nothing about, okay? The other thing I think this industry needs is the FAA needs to step up to the plate, and it needs to have some kind of comprehensive enforcement thing. The people that are trying to do this legally and play by the rules are getting hammered by people. I see pictures of people in San Francisco flying off of skyscrapers, you know, in the fog and stuff, and they're flying their drones off of, you know, 27-story buildings and things. Dover downtown in the financial district. I mean, it's crazy. We're not there yet with the engineering. So I think those are the things. We need enforcement, we need risk-based, scientific risk-based rules, and we need the community to grow up a little bit. And on that, I got to leave it because I got to run out and hit the meter. I do want to hear Victor's song, but thanks for having me on. And if the hate mail gets too bad, just forward it to me. You know I can handle it.
Yeah, I will. No, thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you there, Jonathan. The static face, and that is as animated as Jonathan ever gets. That's the amazing thing. He is Captain Static. And dear viewer, thank you very much indeed, wherever you are. Don't forget, we actually do this every Tuesday at 2100 GMT is our normal hangout time. This was a special because of Dr. Singer's fantastic case. Thanks for the work you did with that, Jonathan. Hopefully people will also reward you with beers if they ever see you at a show or anything. And we'll speak to you again on Tuesday, perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah. And thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I will see you later.
All right, mate. Take care. Have a lovely weekend. Dear viewer, everybody have a lovely, safe weekend. Cheers all. Bye-bye.